European Union member states, along with G7 countries and Australia, have reached an agreement on price caps for Russian petroleum products. The move is the latest part of a push to limit Russian President Vladimir Putin's war chest. Officials say the caps involve two price levels: $100 per barrel for more expensive fuel like diesel, and a $45 on lower quality products such as fuel oil. Sweden, which currently holds the rotating EU presidency, called it an important agreement as part of the continued response to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. In December, the EU and G7 imposed an embargo on Russian crude oil. The $60 per barrel price cap was set on Russian crude coming in by sea. The second or latest embargo on Russian fuel is set to come into force as early as Sunday. EU diplomats called the agreed price levels well balanced. They also said that the cap hits the goal of reducing Russia's income while guaranteeing access for third countries. Now, the Kremlin, meanwhile, has lashed out at the EU ahead of the embargo coming into force, insisting it will lead to a further imbalance of the international energy markets. So, after 9 months into the war, the West agreed on a price cap on Russian crude oil. 2 months later, we have an agreement on refined petroleum products as well. But the intention to cut the so-called Putin's war chest was made public long before. In fact, calls of a ban on Russian oil imports began as soon as the war began in February last year. As early as May last year, European Union leaders agreed to pursue a partial ban on Russian oil. European Council President Charles Michel has announced the same on the 31st of May.
Tonight, the European Council agreed a sixth package of sanctions. Concretely, it will allow a ban on oil imports from Russia with a temporary exemption for imports delivered by pipeline. To be precise, the sanctions will immediately impact 75% of Russian oil imports, and by the end of the year, 90% of the Russian oil imported in Europe will be hit by this measure.
Now, what remained was agreement on the so-called technical details. Europe conveniently took around 6 months to work out the same. We remind you that the war was still raging in Ukraine through these months, and precious human lives were lost every day. Now, what also continued was the West schooling other nations to not import Russian oil. Countries like India and China were meanwhile criticized for buying Russian oil, even as Europe continued to do the same during this time. As of the 20th of September 2022, the EU was still the biggest market for Russian crude. On January the 3rd, Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar subtly called out European hypocrisy over Russian energy imports while defending India's position.
The European Union, between February 24th and 17th November, has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined. Just as I were to give you an India comparison, the oil import in European Union is like 6 times what India has imported. Gas is infinity times because we don't import, whereas European Union has imported $50 billion worth, 50 billion euros worth. Even coal imports from Russia by European Union, I'm not singling any particular country, is 50% more than India's imported.
A month earlier, in December of 2022, Jaishankar, speaking alongside German Foreign Minister Baerbock, reiterated a similar take on Europe. Now, such answers seem justified, given the West's constant schooling of other countries since the start of the war.
Our message to any country continues to be that obviously abide by the sanctions, but that we have put in place and recommended. I don't believe this would be violating that, but also think about where you want to stand when the history books are written in this moment in time.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.